And those walls are there because it's walling off pain, old deep pain, and we don't want to experience any more pain. So Saturn can be areas that we're very stuck and we're very rigid. Saturn can feel very rigid. It has that quality to it, very constricted. And so it always shows us those areas that we definitely need to dig into, and they're usually painful areas, but by doing that, we let go of the pain, we embrace it, let it go, and then we're able to move on to new experiences without the fear and without the walls. Okay, Saturn being in your 7th house, which is the house of relationships. Okay, so there's some definite lessons. Saturn shows us our biggest lessons and areas that we need to grow and learn. Now, on the other hand, Saturn shows incredible places of inner strength, and where we're really willing to work, and for those things that we want the most. Okay, and it can really give an incredible quality of discipline. And it's just, if we want something enough, we'll work towards it, and we'll work very hard towards it. Okay, so definitely lessons in love and relationships. Saturn is called the Lord of Karma also, and it shows areas where we have karma, if you believe in karma, and things that we brought in with us to specifically work on, so we can keep evolving as we are as human beings. Okay, so I would imagine that partners that you have been with, are with, maybe feel very fated, that it feels very karmic, that like you knew them before, like it's a previous connection, and it just has that quality to it. And also, the 7th house is funny because it's the house of projection. Projection meaning, in the psychological term, of parts of ourselves that we're not quite in touch with, or we don't want to own, that we will place onto other people. We will project them onto other people to where we have them act that part out for us. Because it's really what the whole journey is about, is really integrating and becoming whole beings, and we really do tend to project positive and negative things onto other people that we're not quite ready to look at within ourselves. And so the 7th house can show where this happens, because it is the projection screen in a sense. And it's interesting because so often our partner really represents a lot of our projections, and so the 7th house is about both of those things. And so you might attract Saturn people to you, Saturn people in general, but particularly in relationship. And Saturn people meaning maybe older people, or father figures, or very disciplined, maybe harsh, constricting kind of people. Somebody to play Saturn. If the parts of Saturn that you aren't owning, I can almost guarantee will come to you through other people. Now, if you had another planet in the 7th house, then those qualities of that planet might come to you through other people. But since Saturn is here, that's what you will be experiencing. Also, you have Aquarius. Saturn's in Aquarius, and you have Aquarius in that house. So you might experience also Aquarian type people who are kind of the opposite in some ways of Saturn. They're very open and very progressive and very future-minded, and they love computers and they love machines and they love anything to do with the future and science fiction kind of stuff, and they're ahead of their time, and they're rebellious, and they're sometimes a little strange. Strange meaning they do their own thing, not what society calls for. So it's interesting you have both of these things here, because they're kind of opposite in a way. Saturn being very much, very conservative, very much about following the rules of society and fitting in and going along with what everyone else does. And Aquarius is the other way. So you might find both of those kinds of people, or maybe both of those qualities in one person, but attracting that. And so with Saturn here, it's very much about owning as much Saturn energy as you can, and that's going to be happening right now with Saturn return, because Saturn, when it returns to exactly the place where it was born, is very much about, it kind of illuminates that placement and in your chart, and it just kind of says, okay, it's time to look at this. What am I owning? What am I not owning? What needs to be worked on? What have I integrated? Where can I pat myself on the back that I've really worked hard, and where do I still need work? Because it's kind of like with Saturn, the work's never done. There's always areas to take care of within yourself, and through that, as I said earlier, comes the wisdom and the real internal deep satisfaction of a job well done and feeling good about yourself. So you also may attract maybe the more negative side of Saturn through your relationships, and that could be pain, rejection, and disappointment from other people or in relationship, and consequent loneliness from that. Or you may feel that within the relationship, or feel unfulfilled even if you're in a relationship. And so it's really about looking deep within yourself once again, and creating the stable inner relationship with yourself. And the more strong and stable you are within you, and less needy from the negative needy position of others, the more I think you'll not attract that to yourself. And I think I mentioned this earlier, you may be, since Saturn's kind of the archetype of the father, grandfather, the wise old man, the teacher, and kind of authority figures, that you might be attracted to that type of a man, and you may ultimately marry this type, or be in a long committed relationship with this type of person. And also with his own, incorporated with the Aquarian energy of his own quirks, and having some of that Aquarian quality also that I talked about earlier. You have, I would think, a real ability to be very committed and very loyal in a relationship. And when it's something that you want, to really be willing to work hard. And to realize that it's not just, love at first sight and everything's going to be happily ever after, but realize that relationships take work, and to have a realistic attitude. I think that you probably do have a realistic attitude about it, and know that it's something that can really endure over time if you're both willing to work. You also, on the other hand, might have a tendency to stay stuck in a relationship that you're unhappy in, but so willing to want to make it work and to stick through it that maybe sometimes it's better to move on, and to really acknowledge that aspect also. So Saturn being your place of greatest fear, that there could be a real fear of intimacy, and if that's true, to really look at that, and to look at childhood issues, look at past relationship issues, and to see any walls that may have been built up around pain from the past that's keeping you from being in the moment and being intimate and really being present without your fear. Now, you have some aspects to Saturn, which I'll talk about aspects when I finish doing the whole chart, so I don't get too spread out here, so we can stay focused. But we'll talk about those just for a minute here, since we're on Saturn. Saturn's an important planet for you. It's very important. So I imagine your Saturn returns quite an event happening for you these days. It has 5 aspects, meaning aspects are the geometric connections between planets. In the middle of the chart, in the middle circle, you'll see all these lines. And those are called aspects. And you'll see how the lines connect the different planets together. And that's where astrology, to me, gets real interesting. It gets very fascinating. Because the planets being these different parts of yourself, it shows the planets' relationships to each other. And they all have to be within certain degrees of each other. And then they form all these different aspects, some which are harmonious and some which are not so harmonious. So it's kind of like it shows the working relationships of the planets to each other. And so your Saturn has 5 connections to other planets called aspects. And that's where it just shows more the psychology, the deep psychology inside of somebody, because it takes all those pieces and it hooks them together. And some aren't connected, some are connected, some are connected harmoniously, some disharmoniously. So that's where it gets real juicy and real interesting. And takes the pieces and makes more depth, creates even more of a picture. Now you have some so-called difficult aspects to your Saturn in your natal chart. Okay, why I say so-called, because I don't look at anything as bad or good. I think they're just areas where it shows we need extra work, and it shows areas where we came to really be committed to work on those, even though they can be uncomfortable or kind of feel like it's an energy pushing on you all the time. I think that's so we can have an awareness of it and then work to changing that and really working to create harmony between those planets. Okay, now you have a Saturn squaring your Venus, Saturn squaring your Mercury, and Saturn opposing your Mars. Okay, I'll get a little more detail into those later, but I just want to bring it up right now as I talk about your Saturn. And squares and oppositions are considered the more difficult aspects. And as I said, difficult only because they're places of great awareness. And I consider it's kind of like a fire under your butt. It's like you can never quite forget about it. There's always an uncomfortable feeling. And so it's something that you need to work on in yourself. And by working on it, then you can come to a place of resolution. And then find it to be a place of great strength and great wisdom, but it does take work. And Saturn squaring Venus, Venus, we haven't got to Venus in your chart yet, but it's very much about planet of love and how you love yourself, how you love others, and your self-worth and how you feel good about yourself. And with Saturn squaring that can really create issues of not feeling lovable, not feeling worthy, and feeling lonely and left out, and maybe just needing so much love sometimes that it just doesn't feel like it can ever be filled up. So I imagine all your issues with Saturn are really up right now, because with Saturn on your natal Saturn return, it's not only going to stir up Saturn, it's going to stir up all the planets that are connected to Saturn by aspect. Okay, so everything that's happening with, say, Saturn has that square to Venus, it has a square to Mercury, it has an opposition to Mars, and it has a couple other things going on too, and those are all going to be stirred up, and those are the places of deep fear and deep pain and old pain. And so that's why Saturn can be so hard. Saturn return can be so difficult and so painful, because it brings all this stuff up. It's like it opens the old wounds, places that you thought were healed, but underneath they weren't. And so it really opens up those old wounds. And even though it's not fun, it's an incredible time for clearing out that old pain, so you can really get on with your life in a sense and move forward from a place of not having that fear and not having that protection and being able to be more vulnerable and in the moment. It's like having a fresh start and really dealing with our childhood up until our age 29, and then moving forward with a fresh foot. Saturn is very much it crystallizes. Crystallizing meaning it solidifies things. And so when Saturn comes back around and hits your natal Saturn in the Saturn return, it decrystallizes all those old patterns, all those old habits that we've been carrying around for the last 29 years. And even though they're not particularly in our best interest, a lot of these fears and these old pain, we're attached to them, attached to the old crystallizations, because it's what's familiar. So Saturn's very much about releasing the old forms and what's familiar, and then we can create new forms. It's not just about letting them go and then floating off into nothing, because Saturn is always creating form. So it's about letting go of some of those old forms, even though they're familiar, and being willing to create new forms on a higher sense, in a higher sense of evolution. And so this is a big time for you. And once again, we'll talk more about Saturn with Saturn return later. I'm wondering what's happening for you with your relationships right now. If you're in a relationship, what's going on, or past relationships, because Saturn not only is come back on your Saturn for Saturn return, but it's been in your 7th house for a while now, and it's going to continue to be in your 7th house. So just having Saturn in your 7th house period, you're going to be looking at your relationships very deeply, and there's going to be some old crystallizations in relationships decrystallizing, and perhaps looking at relationship in a new way, and maybe taking responsibility in certain areas, and looking at, does this really work for me? Is this for my best interest? Is this for my best growth? So relationships really under the microscope right now for you, and your relationship particularly to yourself. And it's really about self-love, self-worth, and looking at any areas of your life where you're not loving yourself, and why, and not feeling worthy, and why. So ultimately, any relationship is a reflection of our relationship with ourselves, and the more clear we get, and the more responsible we get with ourselves, the more self-worth we have, self-esteem we have, and the more we love ourselves, then that can only be transferred to others and to more positive relationships. So it's really time. This is really about looking at how you feel about yourself, and digging into those old places of pain and hurt, and issues of self-worth and self-love, if they're there, and what's keeping you from really being a whole person and really allowing love into your life in the deepest way, and letting yourself be really fulfilled and loved. Okay, enough of Saturn right now. Let's go on to the 9th house. 8th house actually is not empty. It has Chiron in it. It's not written in your chart, but it's there, and Chiron's very important. And I will talk about Chiron next, after I finish going through the 12 houses and your planets. So Jupiter is in Aries in the 9th house. Now, Jupiter's natural placement is in the 9th house, because the 9th house is naturally ruled by the planet Jupiter. And so this is a real strong placement, since it's in its natural house. And Jupiter is the planet of opportunity, good luck, expansion. Wherever Jupiter touches in our chart is kind of a place of good luck and benefit. He's kind of like, I look at Jupiter as kind of like this jolly old Santa Claus energy, where he's jolly and he's happy and he wants everyone else to be happy, and he comes bearing gifts and luck, good luck, and fortune. So Jupiter's in the 9th house, and he's in a fire sign of Aries. And Aries is a very strong fire sign. It's very, it rules Mars, so it has a Mars quality to it where it's very enthusiastic and it's very independent, and there's a lot of energy there, okay, and a lot of motivation. The ninth house it's the philosophy house. It's kind of that place of, what does life mean? What's the meaning of life? And really kind of higher education, and it's like this planet of gurus and of teachers and people who have really walked a long way in life and gathered a lot of wisdom. And it's about mind expansion, really expanding your mind and learning what I mean by higher education, stuff outside of school, the reading, writing, arithmetic kind of stuff, like more philosophical things and spiritual ideas and religious teachings. It's the house of faith, and Jupiter is also the planet of faith, and it's also about travel, especially travel to far and exotic places. So that's a fun placement for Jupiter because it's naturally happy there, and the two go hand in hand. I would think that there would be a very strong intuition, that you'd have very strong intuition, and that shows up in other places in your chart. So once again, I really encourage you to listen to your intuition, to follow it. It would give good judgment and make you very curious and interested in any kind of higher thought. As we said earlier, mind expansion, philosophy, and the meaning of life. That's probably a focus for that aspect, one aspect of your being. And that probably also makes you different than the rest of the crowd, along with some of the other things we talked about, like really wanting to get underneath things and just like, but where's the meaning? What's the meaning of this? And really wanting to incorporate depth of meaning into your life. We talked about travel earlier, and this would indicate definitely that would be very beneficial for you to travel if at any point you're able to, whatever kind of travel it is, short travel, long travel, foreign travel, exotic travel, that it would be very expanding for you, and it would feed your soul. And if you're not traveling externally, traveling internally, letting your imagination go, really reading about other places and studying about other places and other cultures. I think this would be really nice for you. And with that Aries in the sign of Aries, definitely would give you leader, make you a real true leader kind of a person, and a real pioneer in areas that maybe others around you don't explore, haven't explored, and it's like you're into other things. You're into things that kind of dip beneath the superficial everyday life. Once again, I would cultivate patience, maybe the need to cultivate patience, because this Jupiter is very over-expanding, and it doesn't like to stop once it gets going, and Aries is the same way. So sometimes to realize that there's moderation, and to kind of cultivate that moderation and the quietness sometimes, instead of feeling like maybe you really always need to be out there doing something. Once again, the balance, finding the balance. Okay, now we're up to your midheaven, which is called your midheaven. The very top of your chart, the line between the 9th and the 10th house, is what was straight above you when you were born, okay? Now you have the sign Aries there, and the 10th house in the midheaven is very much about being in the world. You're out there. It's about your career, and it's about reputation, public image, destiny, and your place in the world. Your career, the work that you do in the world, and it's about having power in the world. And Aries being up there, Aries is pioneer. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, fire sign, motivated. I'm going to do this no matter what. So you've got a lot of motivation, I would imagine, to whatever you decide to do in the world, or whatever you are doing in the world or have done in the world. And in terms of career, that there's a lot of motivation there. And you can probably really get yourself going easily. You can start on projects. It's probably just a feeling of there's nothing that you couldn't do. So that's a real positive feeling and sign to have up there. But once again, just remember moderation. Maybe there's and acceptance and patience of some things that maybe you can't do. Now you have the planet Venus and the planet Mercury in your 10th house. And Venus there, I would think, Venus is a planet, it's a planet of love. It's a planet of relationships with others. It's a planet of our relationship with ourselves. It's how our ability to allow love in and to give love. It's also about aesthetics and art and our value system. So Venus is friendly. It's a friendly planet. So I would think Venus up there. It's like Venus. Those planets are out there. They're out in the world. They're not real personal. They're not deep within you. They're out there. And so I'd imagine you'd have a very friendly approach to the world, and think that the world's a friendly place and experience it that way. And this could be a great placement for public speaking and for inspiring people. Really. To lead people in a positive way, in a loving way. Venus here, you would definitely like security and comfort. You probably like nature. Nature is very fulfilling and very, very much creates balance for you and makes you feel good. You'd be very reliable and very responsible in whatever you do, particularly in your work and being in the world. And Venus in Taurus, it's in the sign of Taurus, would definitely give enjoyment of the good life. And liking things to be harmonious and comfortable. And anything that you do, but particularly your work in the world, it must be enjoyable for you. It must be harmonious. It must make you feel good. This is important for you. That whatever you do makes you feel good. And it's in harmony with you. And sometimes Venus in Taurus gives a really good voice for singing, a singing voice. And being that it's in the 10th house, maybe you'd be good at singing or entertaining for the public. And also a working relationship might work well for you. So your partner, that both of you can work together in like-minded interests or a goal, dreams that you have, ideals, that would probably work well with you. And also with Saturn in the 7th house, which is also about work, and 7th house being about relationships, that somebody that you could work with harmoniously, I think would be real nice for you. Now Mercury, the planet Mercury in Taurus, in the 10th house. Taurus is a very practical sign. And Mercury is the planet of how our mind works. It is the ruler of the 3rd house, so all that stuff I talked about, reading, writing, being a teacher, and how we take information in, how it's about talking with others, sharing with others, the communication aspect. So Mercury's the mind planet and the communication planet. So being in Taurus, I would imagine that you're very practical, and once you learn something, you never forget it. Because Taurus is very earthy, and it's very practical, and that it's just maybe more practical things interest you, that there's a balance there, that things have to work and be practical for you to be interested in them in some ways. Mercury in the 10th house may definitely show some writing and or speaking ability that you could use in a career. And then together with Venus up there, Venus being of the arts, that there could be artistic ability, and particularly writing or teaching out in the world. That shows real positive potential for that, or maybe you're already doing that. Okay, on to the Sun, which is in Gemini, and it's in the 11th house. Okay, Gemini is very much, it's ruled by Mercury, which I just talked about. So Gemini is very much into information. It loves to read. It loves to expand its mind. It loves to gather up information. It loves different people. It loves talking and interacting with all kinds of different people. The more the better, just because it's interested in people and it's interested in life. And that's Gemini energy. And the Sun is like how it came to shine, because the Sun is a star. And if you were to go outside our solar system, you would see that all the planets are revolving. It's a star, and so it's like how we came to shine. It's our personal star. The Sun is very much what we came to do in this life, and kind of our destiny in some ways, our purpose. And so now you have Sun in an air sign. Gemini is an air sign, and the 11th house is an air house. So like your moon, which is in an air sign and an air house, you have your Sun in an air house and an air sign. So the quality of air is very much stressed again. And so I would think that your friends are very important, because the 11th house is also about our friends. It's about our groups, the people who we hang out with, our social circle, and it's about our life direction. So those two go very well together, Gemini and then the 11th house. So I would think that your friends are very important to you, and whatever your social group is, your social circle. And I would think that you're extremely perceptive, very inquisitive and curious. That's the Gemini qualities. And that you really came to, it kind of matches the rest of your chart, how it's all your sun sign in Gemini. It goes so well with the rest of your chart. The way it's all spread around. It's like gathering as much information and as much experience as you can. And the moon sign, being in an air sign in the 3rd house, in an air house, it's very much just, there's a lighthearted quality about it, of really wanting to experience as much as possible and to incorporate all of that into who you are. And the 11th house is about our goals and our hopes and our dreams. And so I'd encourage you really to keep in touch with your hopes and your dreams. Really have your intent to make them come true, because that's important for you. Next, we'll talk about the 12th house. And the symbol you see there, which is like an upside down U with little circles on the ends, is called the North Node. And it's not a planet. The North Node is, technically it has something to do with where the moon crosses the ecliptic of the zodiac, and it's a whole scientific thing. But there are 2 nodes. What you're looking at there is the North Node. And then there's the South Node, which isn't on the chart, printed on the chart, but it's directly opposite the North Node, so it would be in the 6th house. And what these represent, the North and the South Node, are basically where we're coming from and where we're heading. The North Node being where ultimately we evolve towards. It's kind of new territory for us, and it's what we've chosen this time around, this life, to really move towards. And the South Node being old territory. It's what's familiar, it's our skills that we bring in, it's what's very familiar to us. And so the trick with the North and the South Node is you want to create a balance. You don't want to stay stuck on your South Node and what's really familiar to you, because then you're not growing. And the purpose of having the North Node is so you will grow and incorporate new areas into your life. So it's about kind of creating a balancing dance between the two and staying in touch with your South Node so you're feeling comfortable and you're bringing in those past skills, but also hanging out enough in your North Node area, the sign of the North Node and the house of the North Node, to where you're really incorporating some new areas and exploring new territories and not becoming rigid. Okay? So, having the North Node in the sign of Cancer in the 12th house, okay? The sign of Cancer is a water sign, deep water sign, and the 12th house is also a water house, okay? So you are moving towards water, deep water. And in your chart, you only have one water sign, okay? And that is, what do we have here? Neptune in Scorpio, which is a water sign. And Neptune moves very, very slowly, okay? Oh gosh, I don't know exactly. It maybe takes 12, 15 years to move through a sign. So that's not a real personal planet. Say if you had your sun or your moon or Venus or Mercury in a water sign, that would be more personal. You would be more personally familiar with water, the element of water. Since Neptune's a very, very far planet out in the solar system, it's more transcendent, it's less personal, it's more generational, because people for 12, 15 years had Neptune in Scorpio. So water isn't a real familiar element for you, and you came to incorporate the element and the qualities of water into your being by this placement with the North Node. So you have one planet in water, you have 3 planets in air, you have 4 planets in earth, and you have 2 planets in fire, including your rising sign, which we'll talk about next, your rising sign. So you're quite balanced in fire, earth, and air with 3, 4, 3, and then only 1 water. So it is very much about incorporating the feelings, the qualities of water, and that being very much learning to flow and feel deeply, to feel very comfortable with your feelings. And the 12th house is an interesting house. It's like you go through the 1st through the 11th houses, and you're dealing with very external things and internal things. You're dealing with developing yourself and your relationship in the world and with other people and your career and your home and the whole thing like that. And then you come into the 12th house, and it's about letting it all go. It's a very transcendent house. It's about experiencing other dimensions, other realms. It's very much a house of psychic ability and spiritual experience, and it's the unconscious, it's dreams, it's past lives. It can also be our karma that we bring from past lives, and healing qualities, healing gifts that we have to offer. So it's a very otherworldly house. It's ruled by Neptune, so it has that intangible quality. It's all about things that you don't really see, but you feel, or you see within yourself in your third eye or in inner vision. And so your North Node is in this house in the sign of Cancer, and Cancer is very much a deep feeling water sign, and it's very psychic, and it's very intuitive, and it's very attuned to natural rhythms, and it's very at home in the rich inner world of fantasy and imagination, and being in touch with other worlds. So this is where you're heading towards. Where you're coming from is Capricorn. Capricorn is just the opposite of that. It's an earth sign. It's very material oriented. It's very much accomplishment oriented. 12th house isn't about accomplishment. It's about being in the moment and just being. And Capricorn is very much, and the 6th house, which is the South Node is also in the 6th house, is also an earth house. So it's very much about tangible things, what you can see, touch, taste, feel, hear, that whole thing. And it's very accomplishment oriented, as I said, and doing instead of being. very much doing things, accomplishing. So those are two very opposite places to come from. And it's about bringing those qualities of accomplishment and doing with you, but not being stuck in it, and being willing to surrender yourself up to the transcendent qualities of the 12th house. It's about creating a balance there and really being willing to incorporate that area into your life. It's like opening up a whole new world and really allowing yourself to be comfortable, sometimes not doing, just being, just spacing out, just feeling, just kind of tripping out on other worlds and your inner world, and really cultivating that rich inner world and letting yourself feel good about it and not think, well, this is impractical, or this isn't getting anything done, or this is silly. But really kind of letting that fairy-like quality come in and balance out with that. Allow yourself to be silly, and allow what's considered silly. Allow yourself that childlike innocence and that just that inner fairyland and that the inner realms. Really cultivate that. So it's about learning to flow and feel deeply and being comfortable with not having control or really knowing exactly what something is, or categorizing it. Just letting it be. Just kind of letting things be and letting yourself be. And feeling unity rather than compartmentalizing things into certain areas so you can understand them, but just letting things be. This is really a placement of an indication of reaching for spirituality and transcendence of material concerns and worldly matters. Really letting some of that materiality go and concerns of the world. And I'm not saying completely, because this is just one aspect of you, but cultivating the other part of this part. To move towards the unspoken, the unseen, and the other realms that we talked about, to have faith in the existence of this, to know that it's just as real as the world that we see, but just because it can't be proven that it's not real. So letting yourself really get into that, really cultivate it. It's like a special little garden with magical little flowers and fairies that it's really time to grow that little garden within. I would really encourage you to pay attention to your dreams, and as I've said before, really listen to your intuition, psychic hunches, and cultivate that and any healing gifts you feel you may have, to really watch any spiritual experiences or funny synchronicities and really give credence and credit to that. And as I said earlier, it's okay to let yourself go, to space out sometimes, to let yourself feel really deeply, to value nature. I'm sure nature is important to you with other qualities and things that you have in your chart, but to really see the magic in nature, feel the magic in nature, let nature become a spiritual experience, and to really get into natural rhythms. Watch the moon, the phases of the moon, and sit under the moon sometimes and just get into those kind of hidden qualities, those magical qualities. Be aware of the effect that emotions have on your body, and know that anything that's repressed can show up in the body. Can really cause things in the body. So really watch the emotions and the effects that the emotions have on you and your body. Be aware of that. And I think to sum it all up, it's to really know the true strength is in vulnerability. Because Capricorn and Virgo, where the South Node is, where you're coming from, isn't particularly vulnerable. And it likes to be in control. It likes to know exactly what's going on. And it's about letting go and letting yourself be vulnerable. And knowing truly that's where the strength lies. Not being silly or stupid, but to continue having discernment and being smart about things. But also it's about really letting yourself be vulnerable and intimate and trust in that. Okay, so we went around your chart all through the 12 houses, and one thing we have left is the rising sign. And the rising sign is exactly what's between the 12th and the first house. It's on the line there. If you were to look at the chart, it says a clock, it's at the 9 o'clock position. And the rising sign is exactly that. It's if you were to go out when you were born, and if it was a flat area and you look straight out, it's what was rising exactly, the zodiac sign rising exactly when you were born. And the rising sign indicates kind of how you appear to the world and how you see the world and how others see you and how you react to the outer world. It's kind of like, in some ways, a mask that you wear. It's more like the personality aspect of the chart, where it's what you show to the world and it's how you see the world. And your rising sign is Leo. And Leo is very sociable. It likes to have fun. And it rules the heart. It's ruled by the heart, Leo. And it's very generous, and it's very sociable. Leos like to get attention. So I imagine there's a part of you that likes to have attention. Sometimes it can really be like the life of the party. And so you can probably enjoy being the center of attention sometimes. Leo's it's considered a royal sign, a sign of royalty. So I imagine that there's a royal quality to you that people notice. Just something a little different than others. You probably have a real ability to make people feel good. And you know how to show people how to have fun and enjoy themselves. Because Leo is the sign of the kid in some ways, the inner child, and Leos really like to express themselves, and they need to express themselves and be creative and have fun while they're doing it. So along with that Gemini and that Libra, with your sun and your moon in Gemini and Libra, I would imagine that it just really even more focuses that quality of sociability and liking to be around people, and that's fun for you and fulfilling for you. So all in all, your chart's quite balanced. You have, like I said, the earth and the fire and the air qualities are all in balance, and that water quality does need to be cultivated more, which is something that you came to do with that North Node. And you have a good amount of drive and motivation to get things done in your life, and you have that air qualities that gives you a good mind and mentality, and the earth quality where you're practical and you can get things done. And so all in all, it looks like a very balanced chart. And like I said, mostly about really cultivating the water aspect, giving time to really let yourself feel things and to nurture yourself and to really take care of yourself in that way. And I think your chart, you have a lot of artistic ability and a lot of practicalness to ground that artistic. And all in all, I think you came to have fun and to enjoy life and to enjoy other people